Well, hello, Twitter, X, LinkedIn, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. My name is Frank Lavinia, and I took a bit of a hiatus from streaming live because I had every conceivable cold come through my house. In fact, you can still hear I'm coughing. Um, I like to stream every day, or almost every day. But I was just not fit for camera. Let me put it that way. A couple things going on. Um, some interesting stuff going on LinkedIn today. I think the my favorite share of the day was this. All right, well, this is not the favorite share of the day, but if I go to LinkedIn, oops, this is it was a really good post, and I loved it, and I know that they're promoting something, but if you look, hang on, bear with me. I actually had a prolific day on LinkedIn today. This is published another article, an episode of not episode article on my Frank Diggs Data newsletter. Come on, come on. This is why you don't share. This is why you don't share, Frank. There we go. Um, right here. So this is from Alex Wang, and I think it might actually be a share from some. No, it's hers. So let me open this image in a new tab so we get a closer look. And I think this is important. I shared it. I gotten a lot of views on it and stuff like that. But I think that this animation, and I'm not sure if it's promoting semantics or whatever, doesn't matter, right? Data AI is largely based on mathematics. Arguably, our DBMSs are based on mathematics as well, particularly set theory. Regardless of the logos that are here, regardless of this, the process is mostly the same, right? If you look at the breakdown of the process, right, you're getting data from data sources. There's different data loaders. Sometimes there's raw data lakes. Um, there's the process of taking in raw data, trusted data, cleaning up the data, processing it, sharing it either out to a downstream consumer, visualizing it, or doing the AI and the ML ops portion of it. Part and parcel of this process here in the middle, this is really the heart of it all. You have the cataloging, the discovery, the lineage, right? All these things are important, but I want to show something very subtle in this. Where's the AI part of it? Right. Well, the AI part of it's actually very small. Is actually a very small part of it. Now, an important part to be sure, but I think it's important for us to realize that data engineering and a larger process is actually really at the heart of any successful AI implementation. Right. This is the top of the pyramid. This is kind of the bottom or the foundation of it. Right. Another interesting point here was um, kind of earlier today, which is not, I can't find an easy way to share it, but he was basically talking about how ontology, or the study of classifications and categorization, which I think is a pretty good definition for ontology, um, is a non glamorous part of large language models. To which I replied, there's a lot of non glamorous parts to AI. And I would say that the majority of what you see in this graph is not glamorous, right? You don't see large valuations for data engineering companies, right? However, anybody that's doing AI in any serious, repeatable, and scalable way has to have a solid data engineering practice, right? They have to have all of these things in a row because without, let me zoom out. Can I zoom out? Without the left hand part of this, there is no right hand part of it, right? There is none of that. So all of which is to say that data engineering is important. Speaking of data, I will be at the here we go. There's the link. You can still submit abstracts today, actually. Um, this is the OpenAI ChatGPT Fest 2024. I spoke at the um, the August edition of this last year, and I'll be giving a talk, depending on which one to get approved. I'll either be talking about prompt engineering, or I'll be talking about the importance of open source in responsible AI. Right? I think that the latter of the talks about the importance of open source in AI stems from a talk that I gave at a defense industry convention on artificial intelligence, where really wasn't talking about open source per se. It was really tangential to what I was talking about. But when you're dealing with um, situations where life and death are literally on the line, as you are in any kind of defense industry related situation, whether that be our lives of our soldiers, our adversaries, or allies, lives are on the line, right? So how do you make that in an ethical way? And I basically said, humanity as at a crossroads here, because for the first time um, in recorded history, we have the ability to create something that can, I wouldn't say reason or think like us, but something that approximates it pretty well, right? And it's going to get to the point where the approximation and is it actually speaking? I mean, is it actually thinking? Is it actually reasoning like we are? It's going to become a semantic kind of difference, right? It's gonna be a meaningless distinction of, well, is it actually thinking or is it not? It's going to be able to mimic us in a way that will be almost indistinguishable. And when you're making life and death decisions, you can understand that a person makes a life and death decision. You may not agree with it, but you can understand it. Why is that? Because we've been living with that for all of history, right? We can live with that. But when a machine starts making those decisions, can we live with that, right? And we're really at that crossroads now where, if not already, in the very near future, we're going to have these systems that are approximating our ability to reason and think, if not reason and think on their own, right? Um, you know, but we're almost at the point now, I would say, arguably now, right? It doesn't matter, right? Because these decisions are going to be made by these algorithms, by these neural networks that are going to make life and death decisions. In fact, there was actually a recent scandal with a healthcare company that really were making life and death decisions about certain recipients which would receive certain types of care. So arguably, this is already happening. Um, but how do we do that in a way that is transparent, right? In this case, it wasn't transparent. It was just decisions were made. And my answer to that is to introduce the idea of open source to open source AI, right? And when I say open source, I don't mean, share the weights and the biases right inside the model, right? Because I don't think that's feasible. And two, it's not commercially attractive, so no one's ever going to do it. But I would say share the data that it was trained on when you can, but also the methodology. What data sources were chosen? Why? What were you hoping to get out of them? What did you actually see? I think that open source, while not a cure-all for this problem, is a provides a baseline of transparency that you just do not get from proprietary systems, right? And I think we can all agree that OpenAI is really only open in name only, right? They do a lot of things, they hide a lot of things. Now, why? Maybe they have good reasons, but we'll never know. And I think that also giving that one company or one nonprofit organization that actually has a for-profit subsidiary that much power, um, centralizing power to that degree has historically never worked out for humanity, right? In the short term or the long term, right? It just hasn't worked out. So we are setting ourselves up for what the next 100 years are going to look like, right? In a very real way. And I think that an open source approach or the open source philosophy guarantees a certain baseline of transparency that you're not going to get, right? And I take this to heart, right? I mean, I used to be a Windows MVP, right? I used to be very involved in Windows. and Windows software development and Silverlight, right? And then one day, Silverlight was no more. And all of the Silverlight kind of influencers went from being rock stars to stars looking up at the rocks, rocks looking up at the stars pretty quickly. Now, there are much larger forces at play. However, that decision was made behind closed doors in an office building in the Pacific Northwest, not as a community. In fact, the community as a whole was very good. The Silverlight community was very good. In fact, a lot of those folks have moved on to other open source um, open source development technologies. Probably not an accident, right? And myself, I moved on to, well, first I did a brief stint with Windows Phone, but again, that was also kind of killed behind closed doors. Um, but most people at that time could see the writing on the wall. What appealed to me, honestly, originally about data science, right, was the idea that it's mathematically based. Math is platform agnostic, with the exception of that one run of Pentium 5 chips in the 90s. 2 plus 2 is always going to equal 4, regardless of whose data center I'm running in, regardless of whose software I'm running, right? It's always going to be the same. There's a certain power to that. And I think what we're seeing now, writ large, is the power of mathematics. Because whether you're using DALI, Bing Image Creator, Microsoft Designer, Bard, GPT, any of these things, what's actually happening underneath the scenes is a lot of mathematical computation based on mass ingestion of data that it was trained on. So we're really seeing the power of mathematics to a degree that I don't I don't think anyone could really appreciate until you kind of step back from that, right? It's not magic, it's math. And at the core of everything that you're seeing with generative AI and AI in general, right? If you're on Amazon, there are statistical processes and methods that are telling you, like, hey, people like you also bought this, this, and this. And that represents a certain amount of additional income that Amazon makes. Now, I've heard numbers wildly from 25% boost in what they earn per customer to 80%, right? But the fact that even if we'll take the low end, right, 20%, a 20% boost in your income is nothing to sneeze at. And obviously, anything above that is really nothing to sneeze at. And I say that as someone who's been sneezing and coughing for the last 3 weeks. As I work through COVID, as I work through flu strain A, and then finally this week, flu strain B. So I'm hoping I got all of those things kind of done, and I can kind of resume my normal life. But the reason why I love open source, or at least the philosophy, is because it dovetails very nicely with data science and AI, right? There are proprietary platforms in data and AI, right? That is a given. However, the majority of the innovation here are in open source libraries, whether that's PyTorch, whether that's Ludwig, whether that's Python, scikit-learn. All of these libraries are based on open source projects. And there are business models that can be built on top of open source, right? Red Hat obviously probably invented it. And then Databricks is continued that philosophy. Anaconda with Python. It's definitely something that is, despite what a former CEO of Microsoft said, is not a cancer to commerce. In fact, it's actually turned out quite the opposite. Um, but that having been said, it's not going to solve all the problems because there's no one solution that can solve all the problems that we're going to face with AI. But it's my belief and assertion that open sourcing as much of this process as possible provides a baseline of transparency that you're just not going to get any other way that's available right now. And I'd be curious to know what you think, right? I obviously took a very circuitous route to being a believer in open source. It wasn't always. In fact, you can probably dig up some old blog posts where I was like, I don't know if this is going to take off. Um, I think time has proven me wrong, and I'm big enough to admit it. And well, thank you, Unmoved Sweaty. Um, um, Thank you for providing me with spam on my Twitch channel. Um, uh, it just, I used to get mad at these things, but it just means I'm big enough now on Twitch for someone to care to spam me. So with that, I'm going to sign off because I can feel my voice going away, and I have a few more calls today that I have to be not coughing and hacking for. So with that, I will end the stream, and let me know what you think. Is open source really a good way to provide a baseline of transparency in AI? What are your thoughts on that? All right. Have a good one.